Welcome to In Case You Missed It for Wednesday, October 7th and Thursday, October 7th, our last A-Day, B-Day cycle of the grading quarter. Today we're talking about figurative versus literal language, specifically how that affects the register of our writing. So I have the slideshow for today in today's Schoology folder. If you have a moment, watch this Key and Peele video that addresses figurative versus literal language. It will hopefully make you chuckle just a couple of minutes. So why this is important. People misuse figurative and literal all the time. And also, we need to know when it's appropriate and how. And for some people, this is kind of a pet peeve in writing in spoken language. I was so embarrassed, I literally could have died. Well, of course, that's definitely not a literal translation of that word. And we use this to be funny or for hyperbolic effect to show emphasis on something. But perhaps it's a bit overused in language, so let's look at how. So figurative language exists when we want to express something symbolically, words, phrases, and we use things like metaphors, similes, hyperbole, and personification to do that. Hyperbole is specifically when people use the word literally to exaggerate something, a really extreme exaggeration, which has a pretty strong effect. Similes allow us to make comparisons using like or as, so that we're connecting two things that would not normally be alike. But when we make that comparison, it allows us to activate our prior knowledge and understand what is being compared. Now, we also have literal language, which is very important in the spoken and written word. This is when words represent exactly what they mean, the dictionary definition of what they mean. And both kinds of language are very necessary. And since we've just done some literary analysis, we know that that allows us to speak literally about things that are figurative. And when you are doing creative writing, you are speaking figuratively about things that are literal. So it's a good time to think about connotation when in terms of figurative language. Connotation is the way that a word makes us feel. It's the feelings or emotions associated with a word, and particularly whether it has a negative or a positive or sometimes even a neutral connotation. Take these three words, which are very similarly related. The word smell. Smell can be a noun, smell can be a verb, smelly can be an adjective, but smell often has sort of a neutral connotation. What does that smell like? Or, hey, can you smell this? But if we use the word aroma, that has a much more positive connotation. The delicious aroma of dinner that was cooking in the oven, or the beautiful aroma of flowers blooming in spring. When we think about the word stench, that has a very negative connotation. The feelings associated with that are very gross, stinky, aromatic in a bad way, right? So while all of these words deal with that sense of smelling something, smell, aroma, and stench, they each have very different connotation. We have feelings associated with words based off our own personal experiences and based off the kind of film or TV or literature that we've consumed, or also the culture that we grow up in allows us to have different associations with words. So it's important to also express the difference between connotation, which is that feeling or emotion associated with words, and denotation, which is that literal dictionary definition. Sometimes we simply just mean the literal thing that something means. And both of those things, connotation and denotation, are factored into writing through an author's diction, which is their word choice, the words that they actively choose to convey something to you. It might be pretty boring for you to read a piece of fiction or a piece of poetry or a short story with simply only denotative words, with just those dictionary definitions. And makes it much more fragrant and beautiful and delightful and enticing if they use words that have connotation, that figurative language, so that you can associate feeling, human emotion with what you're reading. So when we talk about figurative language, it's very important to discuss cliches and why I want you to avoid them whenever possible in your writing. This is a low register kind of thing to do. And the reason that we want to avoid cliches is that language is so over that it completely loses its effectiveness. That kind of thing is predictable. These are things that if you stay the start or beginning of a phrase, someone can predict the ending. We don't want your writing to be cliche or boring or overused or predictable. We want it to be full of emphasis and power and analysis. So avoid as much as possible using cliches in any kind of writing. It's not a really good idea to analyze cliche. So cliches are things like read between the lines. Someone woke up on the wrong side of the bed. A diamond in the rough. The calm before the storm. What goes around comes around. These are universally used phrases, overused phrases, and they're very, very, very predictable. So although they do elicit an emotion, I want you to be focused on using higher level register language that can also convey emotion without being predictable and overused. So let's think about why. Since we are able to express ourselves, for the most part, pretty clearly with literal language, why do we need figurative language? Why does it exist? Why would we use those things? Well, we use figurative language because that's what elicits emotion, feeling. That's what brings humanity to writing. That's the reason that you listen to songs, that we read poetry. The lyrics matter. That's the stuff that gives a human quality to what we read and to what we write, because not everything that we read or write is simply informative or robotic or informational. We need to feel things. That's what makes themes so incredibly important in the written word. That universal truth about the human condition. We want to understand about stuff that makes us human, the stuff that connects us to other humans, to their situations, to their surroundings, to their understandings. We want to make connections, and figurative language helps us do that. Sometimes we're going to be using figurative language. We need to convey something that is not concrete, really abstract thematic ideas like love or forgiveness, friendship, hate, betrayal, those things that are deeply emotive, but not necessarily concrete. I can't really hold them in my hands. I can't show it to you, but I can use figurative language to express it to you. So when is it beneficial? When are we using this? Sometimes, and not in terms of literal versus figurative, you need to transform something ordinary. You need to express emotion. That would be a beautiful time to use figurative language to do that. Sometimes you simply need to use the literal meaning of something when you are writing or speaking. If something is strictly informational or factual, or sometimes when you're taking something that's very abstract and explaining it to someone else, it's really helpful to use that literal language to pick apart the figurative things. So, does it affect register? Yes, absolutely. That's one reason that I really want you to avoid cliches in your figurative writing or your analysis, is that that really lowers the register of your writing because it's sort of ordinary and predictable. Now, analysis and research, when you're looking at something, looking at the data, sorting out the facts, filling out your elaboration, that's when we use literal terms to explain figurative things. When I asked you to look at mood in the sniper, we're looking at that sort of figurative way that that was shaped, the emotion, the atmosphere that it created, and you're speaking about it, communicating it in a way to me that is literal so that I can understand it better and you can show me your understanding of it. Now, creative writing, prose, poetry, songwriting, scripts, plays, that kind of stuff, we're going to be using figurative language to craft and make connections to other parts of humanity about things that are literal, about things that show up in life, or about things that are abstract and that are difficult to put into terms for other people to understand. You're going to really help people make those connections in that way. So, in terms of register, when you're analyzing, we're going to use literal terms to up the register, but when you're using creative writing, you're going to use figurative language to up the level of your register. So, it kind of works hand in hand interchangeably. So here's what I want you to do today. So we sort of started this whole semester with a little bit of professionalism, register, email writing, and you also wrote a letter to yourself. So we're going to this quarter by following a similar thing. So here's what I want you to do for me. You're going to open an email in your student Gmail. The subject line needs to be your class period. That way I know that it comes from you and what class period you were in, because we are always filling out the subject line in a professional email to a teacher. So this is going to be mid-register, somewhere between 4 and 6. And I want you to sort of outline how these first 9 weeks went for you. This means that you are writing personally, but we are definitely using complete sentences, proper capitalization, and proper punctuation. So tell me, what went well academically? What went well personally? What are the things that were successful for you this quarter? Please also tell me as much as you're comfortable about what you were struggling with. Academically. Maybe it was in this class, maybe it was in another class. If you have personal struggles that you're willing to share, that you can explain to me what's been going on, maybe it's something at home, maybe it's been with your friend group at school, Maybe it's that you've been remote and are really missing your friend group. I want to know. If you're willing to share it with me, I'd be really grateful. Please, if you have some positive or constructive feedback for me about this class, this course, how I run this course, if there's something that I can do to make this experience better or something that you want me to keep doing because it is going well for you, please let me know. It is my goal always to adjust how I handle instruction to be beneficial for you. And if you need something or something is going well, I really want to know about it. So the academic requirement for this email is that somewhere in here you need to include one example of figurative language. So that could be a simile or a metaphor. Maybe you're going to use extreme exaggeration or personification. No cliches. We're going to avoid those because they are not very good and strong figurative language. And I gave you an example. This school is like a maze, and it was impossible to figure out where my classes were. Like a maze is a simile. And I would know as the reader of this that it was large, confusing, difficult to find your way around. You allowed me to make that figurative connection to what that emotion or feeling felt like for you. So include one example of figurative language. And please, in your email, either highlight it or underline it. Make it stand out to me so that I know that you can recognize figurative language in your own writing. Just like all professional emails, this needs to have a greeting. Dear Mrs. Brooks, you have the body of your email and you have a sign off. Sincerely, thanks so much. Have a great day. Yours truly, whatever you want to sign off to me. And then your name.